I decided that this winter I'd sit down and make a comprehensive review video of all of the rail trails that I've ridden in Ontario, and trust me, there are a lot. In my mind there are two seasons. There's trail riding season and there's dreaming about trail riding season. And even sometimes in the dreaming season I still get out on my bike occasionally. With almost 30 rail trails to cover, this really is going to be a lightning review, and they're in no particular order, although I have left my very favourite rail trail to last. And just before that I'll also tell you of a rail trail that I really recommend you don't bother with. I've also broken it into chapters so you can skip around and jump ahead and really research the rail trails that you are particularly interested in. People have asked me how I find out about the rail trails that I want to ride on, and there are various different things that I do, but the first thing that I always do is I go to a website called OntarioBikeTrails.com. This has all of the bike trails on, and you can zoom into your particular area or an area you're interested in and then click on a particular bike trail. It gives you all sorts of useful information if you can avoid all of the advertisements, that is. It'll tell you the length of the trail, the condition, there's some anecdotal information, it talks about the facilities on the trail, it talks about where the trailheads are, and it gives you maps of the trail itself and how to get there. And then there are photographs from people who have actually ridden on the trail itself. So as I said, I use this website as a starting point to establish which trails I'm actually interested in riding on. Once I've established that, I'll normally go to YouTube to see if anybody's filmed it and uploaded it there. Sometimes I'll reach out to the person who's put the video onto YouTube. Other times I might look and see if anyone's put it onto Instagram, and I'll reach out to them as well, just to get a bit of local knowledge and to find out things like where the trailheads with the best parking are, what the condition of the trail is like, if it varies at different times of year. Now, if you're interested in using this website, then pause the video now and you can grab the QR code to get you to the website. If you don't like QR codes, then you can simply Google OntarioBikeTrails.com. We have a lot of trails to get through, so we really should get cracking with the first one, which is the Elora Cateract Trailway. This really is a beautiful trail, despite the fact that the surface can get a little bit rutted and it can get a bit sandy, and at times of the year it can get quite wet as well. But it has really interesting features like the Grand River and the Shan Dam, and it also goes through two really spectacular, beautiful towns of Fergus and Elora. So it's really worth a visit. The Caledon Trailway is the first trail that I actually rode on. It's my local trail. It's about half an hour from where I live. It's a beautiful trail almost any time of the year, although when it's really snowing you can't actually get onto the trail itself. It has lots of historic little sites and it goes through many little villages with great places to stop, but it can be quite busy around towns. The Uxbridge to Lindsay rail trail comes with a little bit of a warning. At certain times of the year and after heavy rains it can get pretty flooded and you have to zigzag your way around the puddles. I have to admit that I really do like this, and it's only a factor at the Uxbridge end or the west end of the trail. The trail itself is incredibly quiet. It's about 45 kilometers long, and in a 90 kilometer ride I only saw 6 people. The trail that I added this year is the Sutton Zephyr rail trail. This is really quite a rocky rail trail. I did it on my mountain bike and didn't really have any issues at all, but some people might find it a bit too rough for their road bikes. It's also quite short and quite a long way from the next nearest trail, so it's not really that easy to join it up to other trails. Can I ask that if you enjoy this kind of content, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. For my friends in the east of the province, I have to put my hand up and admit that I've been a little bit neglectful of Eastern Ontario so far, as it's quite a big trip for me to get there. The K&P Trail, which heads north from Kingston, is the furthest east that I've been, but it really is a spectacular trail with some amazing engineering feats along the way. So I do plan to go back to Eastern Ontario, and hopefully that'll be this year. You can join the Chippewa and Gypsum Mines Trail with a beautiful little trail that goes along by the Grand River, and this forms a really nice little route which was inexplicably quiet. And I say inexplicably quiet because being such a beautiful route and being quite near to a few large towns, I would have thought it would have been much better travelled, but it being quiet really for me gave it added appeal. The Grey County Rail Trail forms the northern part of a really extensive route that goes all the way from Orangeville up to Owen Sound, and as such it really opens up the possibilities of bikepacking in that part of the province and creating larger looped routes. The problem I found was it was fairly exposed. There were very few places to get shelter from the sun, and there was nowhere outside of the towns where you could sit down and rest. I'd be curious to know what your favourite rail trails are. Leave me a comment down below. The Thornton Cookstown Rail Trail, at 19 kilometres long, is fairly short, but it's really well maintained and it goes through some absolutely stunning farmland. Earlier I was talking about the Grey County Rail Trail and how that forms part of a route all the way from Orangeville up to Owen Sound. Well, the southern part of that route is the Dufferin Rail Trail, and as you can see from some of these shots, it's really quite rough, so I decided to take my mountain bike. But when you get north of Highway 11 all the way up to Shelburne, it's a really beautiful smooth surface. Running between Collingwood and Meaford along the shores of Lake Huron is the Georgian Rail Trail. Now, if you like spectacular lake views and quaint little lakeside towns, also if you like riding along sandwiched between the lake on one side and ski hills on the other, then you'll probably like the Georgian Rail Trail. I'm going to talk about the Victoria Rail Trail twice in this video, and it's really important that you understand the distinction between the two different parts of the Victoria Rail Trail. This part, which is absolutely fantastic, runs north of Lindsay and it goes through Fenland Falls all the way up to Kinmount, and it's an absolutely spectacular trail. It runs along by Lake Huron, and Fenland Falls is a stunning little town. I really enjoy just sitting watching the boats going through the lock at Fenland Falls. While there's nothing specifically wrong with the Lang Hastings Rail Trail, I mean it's a very quiet trail, it has an interesting feeling of isolation, and it's an okay looking trail, but it's just not really very spectacular. But where it has benefits is that it does link a lot of the trails of Western Ontario with Eastern Ontario. The Millenium Trail in Prince Edward County is an approximate 50-kilometre trail that goes right through the heart of the county, and it goes through historic and picturesque little towns like Picton, Bloomfield and Wellington. And at the north end of the trail you actually find yourself riding on a causeway that goes right through the centre of Lake Conshohocken, which is kind of interesting and pretty spectacular. Prince Edward County itself is very touristy, which is probably going to be a negative for some people, but the reason it's touristy is because, well, there's an awful lot to see and it's a beautiful place to just relax. Another trail that I really enjoy, but that does come with a warning, is the Beaver River Trail. This is an offshoot of the Uxbridge to Lindsay rail trail, and just like the western end of the Uxbridge Trail, it does get very, very muddy. So I did use my road bike and it was perfectly fine for this, but other people might be more comfortable on a mountain bike. For all of those beach lovers out there, the LN&E rail trail, which runs between Brantford and Port Dover, is an absolute must. The trail itself is in really good condition and it has some pretty spectacular sights along the way, like for example the 166 metre long Black Bridge. But the real prize is what lies at the south end of the trail. If you like hanging out by lakes with your feet in the sand eating ice cream, then this is the trail for you. The next series of trails that I'll show you all form part of the Simcoe Loop Trail, which is a 166-mile circular route. The first trail is the Medonte Trail, which runs from Barry to Orillia. It's a nice quiet trail and it runs all the way along by the north shore of Lake Simcoe. The only issue I have with this trail is, despite the fact it runs along the shore of Lake Simcoe, you never see Lake Simcoe. You have to take a little detour down side roads to actually get a view of the lake. Heading north out of Orillia, you join the Uthoff rail trail, and that runs north towards Midland. I found the Uthoff trail to be very, very quiet, and it does run through some pretty nice looking farmland, but overall it really just felt like it was linking two places rather than being a spectacular trail in its own right. Much of the Penetanguishine Trail is not, strictly speaking, a rail trail, but this doesn't make it any less interesting. The part that I particularly enjoyed was going through the forest up and down these little undulations as it crossed over tributaries that were running out towards Lake Huron. The tiny rail trail, as you can see, is an absolutely immaculate rail trail, really, really well maintained, and it's still part of the Simcoe Loop Trail as it heads south away from Lake Huron and towards Barry. This then joins up with the North Simcoe Rail Trail, which, although it's not quite as well maintained as the tiny trail, it's still pretty decent, and it runs through some very spectacular farmland as it heads back towards Barry and the end of the Simcoe Loop Trail. The Omemee rail trail, which runs between Lindsay and Peterborough, is a really decent trail. It makes for a very easy ride, but the real jewel in the crown of this trail is Dubé's Trestle Bridge, which is just spectacular. The Cambridge to Paris rail trail runs for its entire length alongside the banks of the Grand River, and I found myself here just sitting for ages watching people fish or kayak. It was incredibly restful. And then the reward at the end of the trail is that you come to Paris, Ontario, which in 1999 was voted the prettiest little town in Canada by Harrowsmith magazine, and I tend to agree with them. Most rail trails aren't perfectly flat, but the Hamilton to Brantford rail trail is distinct from others in that it does actually climb quite significantly as you're leaving the town of Hamilton. And if you've been to Hamilton and you've seen the escarpment that surrounds it, you probably wouldn't be that surprised. Now, this climb isn't going to challenge anyone, but I definitely felt it as I was on my return journey and I was able to freewheel down it for such a long way. The furthest north I've been, and one of the first rail trails I rode on, was the Haliburton County Rail Trail. This is actually a fairly rough rail trail, although I had no issue on my road bike. Other people have complained about it being rough and washboardy and a bit too sandy for their liking. If you continue riding south on this rail trail, then you'll eventually end up in Lindsay. Now, some rail trails definitely are better than others, and even those I don't enjoy as much still make for a fantastic day's cycling. But there is one rail trail which was the exception, the Victoria Rail Trail south of Lindsay. The surface was almost unrideable and I was absolutely fighting for every single kilometre. And it's the only time I've ever been attacked by mosquitoes while I'm actually riding. I really would recommend that you avoid this trail. So it's only fitting and proper that we follow that monstrosity of a rail trail up with what I decided this year is my favourite rail trail, the Goderich to Guelph rail trail. So for a start, all of the practicalities are there. The surface is, for the vast majority of it, in really, really good condition. There are lots of places to sit, many of those are actually covered places, and there are even places where local residents have put out water and soda for you to put $1 in an honesty box and help yourself. Along the route there are lots of lovely little towns and villages, lots of places to stop and restock, and yet there are a few places where you have to take a detour, but if you've planned ahead then you shouldn't have any issue with those at all. Despite being quite a long trail, this trail does seem to change quite rapidly, and I think that makes it psychologically fairly easy to ride on. It'll come as no surprise to anyone that I absolutely love riding on rail trails, and it goes beyond the fact that, yeah, there are no cars on them, so they're incredibly safe and you're surrounded by beautiful countryside. It goes to something else. For some reason, I just feel very, very happy and contented when I'm riding on rail trails, and I can't quite put my finger on what it is. I'd be really interested to know if other people have ideas of why they enjoy rail trails so much. Maybe that'll help me realise what it is that appeals so greatly to me. I do hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please remember to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I shall see you on the next ride.